guys, Sam Terrell, the Northwest Aeronaut, and today we are talking about spins! Hey everybody, welcome back. For those of you new here to the channel, my name is Sam Terrell. I am the Northwest Aeronaut, and thank you for joining me. I'm very excited to talk about today's topic. This is a video I've been meaning to make for a long time and finally got around to it. Quick reminder before we get into it, we have memberships available on the channel now. These memberships will get you exclusive early access to all videos and podcasts posted on the channel. So if you're interested in that, you can hit that join button down below, and all of your support goes a long way in continuing to allow me to make these videos and podcasts. So thank you for all your support. All right, guys, so if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I do quite a bit of spin training. Now, generally, all of the spin training is done with and for CFI candidates. The Flight Instructor Certificate is the only certificate or rating issued by the FAA that requires spin training. So while I certainly encourage all pilots to seek out stall and spin awareness training, it tends to be CFI candidates that I'm predominantly working with. So my goal today is to shed some light on what this training looks like and the resources I've used to develop my syllabus over the years. But first, a few disclaimers. Everything I'm about to show you in this video is specific to the airplane I am using and the airplanes that I generally do this training in, okay? Different procedures and behaviors might be present in other airplanes. So I am by no means telling you that this is an end-all be-all technique or a certain behavior that you're going to see out of airplanes when it comes to stall and spins. Number two, I'm not an aerobatic instructor. I encourage all pilots to go get upset recovery training and spin training in a formal aerobatic program and an aerobatic airplane. But I do my best to give the highest quality training I can in the airplanes that I have available to me, and ultimately the airplanes that we generally do the majority of our training in. And finally, my standard disclaimer, just to remind you that nothing in this video should be taken as actual instruction, and if anything, should only be used to start a conversation with your own CFI. All right, guys, so let's talk about my syllabus when it comes to spin training and where I get all of my concepts from. In large part, I have utilized a book by Rich Stowell called The Light Airplane Pilot's Guide to Stall Spin Awareness. Now, this is a great book, and I highly recommend it to all of you. Today, I thought I would review an excerpt from this book titled 12 Stall Spin Myths Exposed. So, the way we're going to do this today is I'll be intermingling segments from inside the airplane, talking about the specific things we do in the flight portion of spin training, while also reviewing these 12 myths. All right, guys, we're going to get into the flying portion here and get into our examples of what the standard spin training flight looks like. And we are going to start with the falling leaf stall. So I've made videos about the falling leaf stall before. You should see a card up here with a link to that. But we always start with the falling leaf stall in spin training because it really shows the general stall characteristics of the given aircraft and really helps reinforce rudder control, utilizing the rudder to simply keep one wing from falling. And as you'll see in the 150, sometimes it can be a little squirrely, but in other planes like the 172, especially on a calm day, it's very docile and easy way to introduce stalls to a brand new pilot. Let's take a look at the clip. All right, guys, so falling leaf stall. I've got videos, another video on this. I'll put it up here. But this is something I go over in spin training because This really teaches you how to use the rudder to prevent a wing from falling, and this is how I introduce stalls in general to brand new pilots, because it should never be more exciting than what you're about to see. Well, all we're going to do is pull our power to idle, and you'll notice I'm not pulling my nose up excessively. I'm just holding it basically at the horizon. I'm using my rudders to keep my wings level. Notice my aileron is not being manipulated. It's staying neutral. All right, airspeed's dropping. We are looking outside for this exercise. We are not looking inside at the ball or anything else. We've got a quiet airframe. We've got a stall indication coming on here, and there's the buffet and the brake, and I keep pulling this back. So the left wing wants to drop, so what do? I use right rudder. Okay, now these Cessna 150s really like to just kind of get into one wing low and just kind of go in a circle like this. And that's fine. We can try to recover it by just putting the nose down, rolling the wings level, and let's try to do the falling leaf again and try to keep the wings upright. But sometimes they just drop a wing and they just start going in that circle, and there's just not enough rudder authority to stop it. So let's just see if we can do this again. Once again, I'm not using any aileron, and I just keep holding this yoke back. All right, we're holding it back, we're holding it back. There's the stall indication and some buffeting, and I'm just keeping our wings level. There we go. And it wants to go left again, but there we go. I was able to save it. And then left rudder to keep it from going right. Okay, this is our falling leaf stall. And then I show them, I say, hey, this is a stall. You see our vertical speed here, you see our air speed is low, and we're just falling like a little leaf, okay? And it's no big deal. And the only thing we have to do, this is like a wild bucking bronco, the only thing we have to do to recover is put our nose down. Once we put our nose down, we can go wings level, add power to stop the descent. Bob's your uncle. That's it, okay? So, well, this one says the 150 is a little squirrely, especially with the small amount of turbulence we have today. That is the most docile way to introduce stalls to a new pilot, and the goal is not to scare them and not to scar them for life when it comes to stalls. Back to you in the studio, Sam.
All right, so that was your falling leaf stall. Now let's jump into these first few myths about spins. Myth number 1, it says flying too slowly causes stalls. The idea being, of course, that speed itself has nothing to do with when an airplane stalls. It's all about that critical angle of attack. Myth number 2, stalls cause spins. And of course, we know that we can stall an airplane without spinning it, as long as we're flying in a coordinated manner, typically. Myth number 3, all cross-controlled flight increases your stall spin potential. I'm just going to read straight from here. It says the reality is cross-controlled flight comes in 2 basic flavors, skids and slips. Skids tend to have a greater stall spin potential than coordinated flight. Slips, on the other hand, tend to have a lower stall spin potential than even coordinated flight. This stems from the idea that when we are in a slip, we have the aircraft yawing one direction, but the horizontal lift from the bank, being in the opposite direction, opposing that yawing force, and therefore not easily allowing a spin to develop. Okay, so there are your first 3 myths about spins. Let's head back to the plane now and talk about wing drops. Wing drops are something that I use as a teaching tool for all students. The last thing I want to have happen is for a student to experience a wing drop for the first time while they are out there by themselves practicing solo. This actually happened to me back in the day when I was on my first solo, coming back to flying after 15 years away. And you can see the clip of that right here.
We'll go ahead and just do a power on stall now. No aileron. Nose down. Holding a heading. North. There we go. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, that was a little bit of a spin.
So that was my experience on my first solo after 15 years. And I don't want that to happen to my students, so I always demonstrate what a wing drop looks like and feels like. And let's take a look at that clip right now.
All right, guys, now we're going to demonstrate that wing drop. This is something I like to show all of my students because they can read about it all day. You can yell at them about right rudder and say, hey, your wing's going to drop, you're going to go on a spin. But until they experience the actual wing drop, it's not going to stick the same way. What law of learning is this? This is the law of intensity, okay? So I just show them, I say, hey, this is what happens. We're doing a power on stall. If you're not using the correct amount of right rudder, we're going to see the ball going to the right. You're going to see your nose going to the left. If you try to use right aileron to stop that nose going left, you're going to get that left wing stalled and it's going to drop just like this. And all you got to do is put the nose down, power idle, bring the nose right up after you take the bank out. And that's all there is to it, guys. Very docile, but at the same time shows them what can happen with misuse of rudder or lack of rudder use. Back to you in the studio, Sam.
All right, so that was your wing drop there. And again, that's something I demonstrate for all students initially when we are kind of getting into the power on stall phase of training. Okay, back to our 12 myths about spins. Let's get into it with myth number 4. Here it says, myth number 4, if you inadvertently stall or spin, just let go of the controls. The reality is, aerodynamics, human factors, and the practicalities of the situation can conspire to make this advice suspect. It says some light airplanes might be able to self-recover from the early stages of some stall spins. However, letting go of the controls a bit later in the process or under a different set of conditions may not result in a recovery at all. Number 2, it says letting go of the controls during a surprise stall spin is not a natural instinct. Clutching the stick or yoke even tighter is a more common reaction. And number 3, it says the majority of stall spin accidents occur at or below traffic pattern altitude. Even if the airplane can self-recover and the pilot is capable of instantly releasing the controls, more altitude will likely be consumed compared to a prompt application of precisely choreographed recovery controls. So, while I do talk about in my training the fact that our airplanes are very reluctant to spin in general, and assuming you don't let it get too far, will recover themselves, I have never ever condoned or taught the idea of simply letting go of the controls to affect a recovery. Number 5, it says, during recovery from upright spins, the elevator control should not be moved forward until rotation ceases. I'm just going to read straight from it here. It says, the reality is, although opposite rudder alone may affect recovery in some airplanes in the early stages of some spins, it may not be sufficient by itself for recovery from fully developed or aggravated spins. Therefore, pilots should not rely on opposite rudder alone during a spin recovery. Pilots should always expect the need for full opposite rudder followed by forward movement of the elevator control to terminate spinning, regardless of the airplane or the type of upright spin encountered. So while we do always want to initiate that right rudder or opposite rudder in the direction of the spin first, we shouldn't expect it to completely recover the spin alone, and we shouldn't wait for the application of elevator until the spin stops or the rotation stops. We should push that opposite rudder, hold it fully, and then be prepared to do sometimes full forward elevator as well in order to break that stall and stop the rotation. Okay, myth number 6, it says, during spins, the slip skid indicator shows spin direction. And the reality of that, of course, is that the slip skid ball is totally unreliable while spinning. This is something that we're going to dive into more here in a bit. But essentially, what you have to understand is that the direction the ball goes in a spin is dependent on where in the cockpit the instrument is mounted. An instrument mounted on the left side of the panel, as is the case most of the time, would show the ball going left at all times, no matter the spin direction.
An instrument mounted on the right would show the ball going right all the time. So if you had two slip skid indicators in an aircraft that were mounted on both sides of the panel, you'd see two balls going separate directions while in the spin. All right, let's get back into the plane for some more flight demonstrations. Next, we talk about cross-controlled stalls. As Richard stated in the document, there are two flavors of cross-control conditions. They are slips and skids. And here I'm going to show you what this cross-controlled stall would look like in each of those conditions.
All right, so you've seen other videos where I do cross-controlled stalls, but just as a quick review, we can do cross-controlling in two different ways. We can be in a slipping condition or a skidding condition. Now, in general, from a slipping condition, the airplane is going to be even less likely to spin than it would be if you were in coordinated flight. Let's go ahead and put a slip in, a forward slip, and we're going to stall the aircraft here. Okay, we've just got a little bit of power in, but we could easily just do this at power idle as well. We're in a slipping condition. Nose is coming up. We hear the airspeed, or we see the airspeed dropping. Stall indications coming on. And here's the buffet. And now we are stalled. And we are not spinning. We're just kind of going down in this little spiral. And to recover, it's very simple. We just relax the control pressures like usual. Put the nose down. That's all there is to it. No spin involved. All right, so the normal cross-control stall, I want to show you, this is where we're simulating the base to final turn. And I want to show you how reluctant these planes are to spinning, at least without power. So here we are. We're going to pretend that we're on downwind. It's a busy day. We're a low-time pilot. We're very overwhelmed. Right now we are basically in one thought mode, one mode of thought. We want to get on the ground. That's the mindset we're in. So we are on downwind. We're already slower on our airspeed than we should be. We turn base, right? We make our call, Twin Oaks traffic, 119ers left base 02. I'm looking for that other traffic that said they were turning downwind or base, okay? Very overwhelmed. We're getting super slow. We have a tailwind on base because there's a crosswind on the runway today. So as we raise our wing to see our runway, we see that we're overshooting our runway. Well, what do? We need to catch it, right? We can't go around because we want to get on the ground. So we bank, but it's not enough, and we don't want to overbank. We don't want to go beyond 30 degrees. So what do we do to try to steepen the turn? We put in left rudder, and that makes us overbank. So we put right aileron in, and as we pull through, it stalls. Now that's it. That's all that happens with power off in this airplane, okay? In this airplane. In a power off configuration, a skidding stall is very benign. Now that doesn't mean we want to be doing that close to the ground, of course, right? Because now I'm going to show you what it actually would look like if you had any amount of power in and what this could turn into. We're going to take note of what our altitude is and how much altitude we lose. Then I want you to imagine if this happened in the pattern. So here we go again. Low-time pilot, very overwhelmed with what's going on. Maybe we're at a new airport. We're on downwind. We're turning base, and we're already getting kind of slow. Remember, we don't need to be at stall speed to do this because essentially what we're doing is an accelerated cross-controlled skidding stall. That's what throws us into the spin. So here we go. We're going over. We're turning base. We lift our wing to see that, oh no, we're overshooting our runway. I have to make it. So I start banking. I use rudder to tighten the turn. I don't want to overbank, so I use that right aileron. And now, look at what happens. Woo! Okay, power back. Nose down, and we fly out of it. But look at how much altitude I just lost. If that happened base to final when at most we're maybe 600 feet AGL. At least we shouldn't be much higher than that. But, we might be 400 or 500 feet AGL. There's no recovering from that, folks. So that is your skidding cross-controlled stall.
All right, so that's your cross-controlled stall, and you can see in the most severe iteration of it how in the wrong place at the wrong time, if you were in the pattern base to final, that can turn out to be a bad situation. Okay, getting back into our 12 spin myths, myth number 7 reads as follows. The longer an airplane stays in a spin, the more airspeed it gains and the faster it rotates. The reality, it says here, is that
The spin is a high drag maneuver. Consequently, airspeed will not continue to increase, but will generally stabilize at a relatively low and constant value. Once the spin develops, usually 2 or 3 turns is what it takes, the rate of rotation will stabilize as well. Okay, and this is all stuff we go over in the ground portion of our spin training. All right, myth number 8. The longer an airplane stays in a spin, the greater the chance of structural damage. And once again, I'll just read straight from here. It talks about the spin itself is a relatively low G maneuver. In general, we are at 1 G throughout the spin, albeit some of those G's are kind of pulling you to the side a little. It's actually only during the pullout or the recovery from the spin where G loads increase, and we need to be particularly careful and cautious, smooth, and immediate with our control inputs. Myth number 9. Since most accidental spins occur too low for recovery, spin training is a useless exercise. Well, it says here, the reality is the myth might be true if pilots were suddenly waking up and finding themselves spinning in an airplane. However, the typical stall spin accident is not a sudden random event. Instead, it is a largely pilot-driven process that culminates in a stall or spin prior to ground impact. Stall spin accidents evolve as a chain of events with warning signs that, if recognized and corrected, can be broken before reaching the spin. Proficiency in the elements of a comprehensive scenario-based stall spin training program should provide pilots with the awareness and skills to prevent an accidental spin departure in the first place. And that's what this training's all about, folks. All good spin training, in my opinion, and certainly my own, is focused on 3 things. It's the recognition, prevention, and recovery of stall spins, in that order. Okay? We recognize it, we prevent it, and in the case that it does go too far, we learn how to recover from it. Okay? Okay, so we saw our cross-controlled stalls just a bit ago, and we saw how devastating that rollover can be if it were to happen at a low altitude in the pattern. This is a great segue into our next segment, which is the incipient phase of the spin. This is where the majority of the training happens. And the reason that is because in the wild, if you will, when you're actually out there with students or whatever, it is unrealistic for any spin to go further than this phase, the incipient phase. And we're talking, in this case, about 1 full rotation. If you are taking a spin further than this inadvertently, something is wrong and probably could use some more training. All right, let's jump back to Sam in the cockpit to talk about our incipient spins.
All right, guys, here we're going to do just the incipient phase of the spin, just 1 full rotation. It might end up going a little further than 1, but this is what the majority of spin training is spent in doing, because realistically, this is as far as any spin should ever go out in the wild with a student or otherwise. If you're going further than this in the wild, something is definitely wrong. All right, so we're just going to treat it like a power on stall. We're going to kick that left rudder over, pull the elevator, and we're just going to hold it for just a split second before recovering, and we'll try to come out on the same heading we start at. Here's our heading there. We've got our visual reference. Let's go ahead and pitch up into our power on stall. Airspeed's dropping. We see that ball going off to the right already. The student is not using proper rudder inputs. We see the nose going left. As we approach the stall, we hear the stall warning coming on. These are all signs of the impending wing drop and spin. Here we go. Over. Whoa! And we're going to recover. Power out. Right rudder. Nose down. And then nose up nice and smoothly. Ailerons were neutral the whole time. Look at that. We didn't even get past 95. And only about 500 feet of altitude loss there. All right. We were within 10 degrees of our heading. What do you know? So that's your incipient phase of the spin. Just 1 simple rotation. Back to you in the studio.
All right, that was your incipient spin to the left. Let's take a look at the incipient spin to the right.
All right, guys, now we're doing the incipient phase to the right. In spin training, we practice spins both left and right. Typically, going to the left is going to be much more common because that's what the airplane wants to do, but it doesn't mean going to the right can't happen.
We've cleared the area. We've made a call. We're going to the right. Doing our power on stall here. As we pitch up, again, the student's just a little bit too exuberant with that right rudder. We see the ball going off to the left. The nose is going right as we continue to slow down. Maybe he's starting to use that left aileron to kind of keep the nose from going to the right. As we get here, we're going to push the right rudder and pull, and there we go, and power out. Aileron's neutral, left rudder this time, nose up, nice and smoothly. Airspeed's reversing direction, and we can climb right out of there.
So there you have it. Incipient spins, one full rotation to the left and to the right, something we practice in the training flight. And, this is also where we kind of do our role playing.
What do you think of role play?
It can be fun.
Yeah.
I will often play the student practicing a power on stall, and I will, to various degrees, either allow a wing to begin to drop or ultimately take the airplane into that incipient phase of the spin to give my student, the CFI candidate next to me, the opportunity to talk me through either a recovery or, if the situation calls for it, to take the controls. Here's an example of that from a past flight.
Airspeed's coming down.
Yep. Okay, airspeed's coming down. There we go.
65, bring her in full power.
All right, here we go. Full power. Okay.
All right, let's keep that ball centered, so a little more right rudder.
Okay, I'm pushing. Yep. Oh.
All right.
Whoa, it's really hard. Okay.
A little more. Let's
Yep.
give it a little pep.
Okay, got it. Yep. Okay.
There she
right,
goes. We're starting to stall out.
Yep,
and
yep.
controls.
Controls.
There you go. You're good.
Is this heaven?
Yep. Get your free tacos.
Okay, guys, so that's the type of fun we have with the incipient phase of the spins. We're going to be getting to the real fun part here with the fully developed spins. But first, let's dive back in to finish out our 12 myths about spins, along with a few talking points that we hit up in the ground portion of our spin training. Myth number 10. Pilots with more experience are better at avoiding fatal stall spins than pilots with less experience. Basically, the reality is that's not true at all. And he talks about certain statistics of very experienced pilots having stall spin accidents. Myth number 11. As a whole, flight instructors are well qualified to teach stalls and spins. And unfortunately, this is not true. I would not even venture to say that the majority of all the pilots I give training to would necessarily be able to teach that same training after the small amount of time we get to spend together. I do so much spin training in general simply because I'm one of the only instructors in the area who is proficient and competent enough to do so. No other instructors really that I know of have an actual syllabus and do it regularly enough to be proficient in it and be able to teach it. So even though it says right here, even though flight instructor applicants receive logbook endorsements certifying that they are competent to teach spins, published studies and anecdotal evidence reveal that flight instructors nationwide tend neither to be well trained in stall spin dynamics nor to have sufficient hands-on experience with spins to be able to provide meaningful spin training. And again, I wish I could spend more time with all the people I fly with and give this training to, because there's just really so much more we could do. The reality is that we're only spending one, maybe two flights together, and I'm getting them, making sure they have a level of proficiency of teaching through a spin, identifying the signs of the stall spin, and be able to recover from it. But I tell every single one of my flight instructor candidates that I highly recommend that they seek additional training, and at the very least, every 12 months, do some recurrent spin training. That is the advice I give every single one of them. All right, finally, number 12, spins can be hard on an airplane's gyro instruments. And basically, they're saying that it's not true. There's been studies done, and they've talked to manufacturers or different people who do work on gyro instruments, and they found no appreciable damage. So with that said, all of our gyro instruments in the planes we spin are electronic. We have G5s and things like that, so it's not really an issue.
All right, guys, so that's largely what my syllabus is based on, okay? And again, with an emphasis on recognition, prevention, and then recovery. Let's go ahead and just talk through some of the talking points that we hit in the training that I provide. So first of all, we talk about what is a spin. Well, a spin is an aggravated stall. And then the next question I ask is, well, what is it aggravated by? And the answer is it's aggravated primarily by yaw. Those are the two ingredients we need in order to get a spin: stall and yaw. Now, it's aggravated by more than that. It's aggravated by the fact that in general, we are continuing to hold pro-stall and pro-spin inputs. But it's the yaw specifically that puts us into the spin and is what takes it from being just a stall into that spin. We talk about aerodynamics of a spin. We talk about the difference between spins and spiral dives, along with the recovery techniques for a spiral dive. As a matter of fact, I've got a video here I'll show you in just a second. But basically, the fundamental difference, this is the question I always ask, what's the fundamental difference between a spin and a spiral dive? And the answer is that in a spin, you are stalled. In a spiral dive, you are not. And that is what makes a spiral dive significantly more dangerous. Many training aircraft have the tendency to either go immediately into a spiral dive or at the very least transition quickly from the incipient portion of the spin into a spiral dive. So, understanding the difference in what a spiral dive looks like and feels like compared to a spin is critical. For more information on this, we can look to AC 6167 Charlie, which refers to this as spiral mode and reads as follows. It says, the spiral mode is an auto-rotation mode similar to a spin. The center of rotation is close to the center line of the airplane, but the airplane is not stalled. Many airplanes and gliders will not spin at forward CG locations, but will spiral. Many airplanes will enter a spin, but the spin will become more vertical and degenerate into a spiral. It is important to note that when the spin transitions into the spiral, the airspeed will increase as the nose goes down to near vertical. The side forces on the airplane build very rapidly, and recovery must be effected immediately before exceeding the structural limits of the airplane. Release the back pressure on the stick, neutralize the rudder, and recover from the steep dive. As in the spin recovery, avoid abrupt or excessive elevator inputs that could lead to a secondary stall. All right, guys, so let's take a look at this. I got my little airplane here, and essentially what you're going to see in a couple clips I'm going to show you in just a second is when we transition into a spiral instead of a spin, essentially what's kind of happening is the airplane is almost spinning around the longitudinal axis. So when we look out the window, we almost look like we are spinning around the propeller like this, instead of spinning around the vertical axis like this. So let's take a look at these two clips and see if we can spot the difference. All right, let's take a quick look at these two clips to illustrate the difference here. Now, it can be a little hard to see the difference on video, but we're going to do the best we can. Here in this first clip, you'll see the plane start to roll over in the incipient phase of the spin. However, it quickly gets locked in this nose down position and begins to essentially rotate around the longitudinal axis as if we are spinning around the propeller. This, in addition to the airspeed rising, which you can't see here, is the classic indication of a spiral and requires immediate recovery. In this next clip, we'll see the plane roll, and as it stabilizes into the spin, you can see the center of rotation is lower in the frame and is not nearly as nose low or as near to the propeller. This is what a stabilized spin should look like, and that airspeed stays stable below stall speed. All right, other things we talk about are the phases of the spin. This would be the entry, the incipient, the fully developed, and the recovery phase. Now, PAIR is the standard spin recovery prescribed in some form or another by most every aircraft manufacturer out there.
But it is important to note that ultimately you should follow whatever guidance your own aircraft POH prescribes for the aircraft you're flying. Since we do use PAIR in our flight training though, let's define what it stands for. That's power idle, ailerons kept neutral, rudder in the opposite direction of the spin, and then elevator forward or yoke forward to break the stall, and then smoothly but immediately back to pull out from the dive. One other thing that is important to note and tends to be a common error among pilots is we need to be sure to release the rudder pressure after rotation stops. Not doing so could cause an inadvertent secondary spin in the opposite direction, and adrenaline combined with all the new sensations involved in a spin can often cause a pilot to get locked into that rudder even after the rotation stops. All right, we also talk about what the instruments indicate during a spin and which ones are reliable. Now, spoiler alert, the majority of the instruments are not that reliable, or at least not very helpful. One instrument in particular we look at is the slip skid indicator, as they mentioned, the ball, because the ball itself, what you got to remember, is it is just a free-floating ball inside of a glass tube. Typically, we talk about stepping on the ball, and so one would think that if the ball's off to the left, well, we must be spinning to the right, and we need to step on the left rudder to stop it. But that's not how it works. In a spinning body, from a reference of an observer in the spin, everything in that spin wants to move away from the center of rotation. So when the ball is placed on the left side of the aircraft, as it typically is, and we are spinning around the vertical axis, which is more or less going to be right in the middle of the plane, that ball is always going to want to go directly away from the center of rotation within that spinning body. So what that means is that it's really being forced kind of into the back of the instrument and off to the left. And that's going to be the same no matter if we are spinning to the left or spinning to the right. The ball is going to be thrown off to the left side of the instrument, and it is not an accurate indication of the direction of rotation in a spin. Let's take a look at this clip I filmed as I spun around in a chair while holding on to a slip skid indicator. You'll see as I move the instrument to the right of center of rotation, the ball goes right. As I move it to the left, the ball goes left, and if I get it centered right in line with the center of rotation, the ball will simply stay centered. So, what is realistically the only instrument you could look at to get a reliable sense of which direction you're spinning? Say if you were in IMC and you found yourself in a spin in the clouds, well, that would be your rate of turn indicator. Your rate of turn indicator will always be tilted. The little airplane in your turn coordinator should always be tilted in the direction of the spin. So that's what you'd be looking at. All right, finally, we talk about aircraft certification, whether our aircraft is certified for spins. Spoiler alert, it is. In the case of our Cessna 150, it is in the utility category and it is approved for spins. We talk about weight and balance considerations, of course, noting specifically that we want a forward CG whenever we're doing spins, and avoid as much as possible any type of aft loading, as that can make it hard, if not impossible, to recover from a spin. In a 172, we need to ensure we are in the utility category because under certain weight and balance profiles, we might be in the normal category, and that would not be approved for spins. So we need to make sure that we have nothing in the back seat or in the baggage area, and that our weight of the aircraft is below the threshold for the utility category, which is usually around 2,000 to 2,100 pounds. We also talk about the aircraft tendencies, and specifically the idea that these aircraft do not want to spin. It should be somewhat of a comforting idea to you and your students to know that, hey, these Cessnas don't like to spin, and there is only ever one reason why they would spin. Can you guess what it is? The one reason why a Cessna spins is simply because the pilot is forcing it to. If you don't force it to spin, it won't do it. All right? So to that end, when we are doing these spins, we kind of have to look at our PAIR acronym
and basically do everything opposite. We have to do basically everything wrong if we're going to have any chance at making these airplanes spin. Power needs to be full. Oftentimes, aileron needs to be turned opposite the direction of the spin, which also simulates the tendency of a student or young pilot as what they would want to do should they improperly try to stop the nose from going over. Rudder needs to be held in the direction of the spin, and the elevator needs to be held full aft. That is sometimes the only way we can get these aircraft to spin at all. All right, guys, we finally come to the really fun part of the video, the fully developed spin. Now, we're going to show you one to the left and to the right here, although it can be very difficult to get these aircraft to spin to the right. So you'll notice the spin to the left happens a lot easier, a lot smoother here. Take note as we watch this. Number one, I am not using aileron in this particular situation. The 150, the Cessna 150, tends to spin a little easier than the 172, and it doesn't necessarily need aileron when going to the left. So in this example, I'm going to be keeping the ailerons neutral. I want you to watch the instruments, watch what that ball is doing as we're spinning to the left, and of course, take a look at all the other instruments as well. Feel free to pause the video on the panel if you need to. Let's jump into the cockpit and take this thing for a spin.
All right, everybody, here we go. We are going into a fully developed spin to the left. I want you guys watching our instruments here. Watch how the ball moves, watch how the rate of turn indicator moves, watch our airspeed, attitude, heading, and of course vertical speed. Watch all of those things. We have cleared the area, we have made a call, and let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to raise our nose as if we're going into a power on stall. And when we get to the top of it, we're going to kick full left rudder, full back yoke for the up elevator, and we'll hold it. All right. Slowing down, 67, 66. There's 60. Okay, we're coming. We see our nose going left, our ball's going to the right. We got a stall indication. Here we go. Woo! And we're just holding it here. We're holding it. There's our spin. Look at our ball. Look at our rate of turn. Look at our attitude and our airspeed. Now we're going to recover. Power back. Right rudder, nose down. There's the stall brake. Now nose up nice and gently, nice and smoothly. We see the airspeed reversing direction. And now we can climb right out of it. And that's all there is to it, everybody. Back to you in the studio.
All right, there was your fully developed spin to the left. You saw I had to use full power. I didn't have to use any opposite aileron this time, but I certainly had to hold the left rudder to the floor the whole time, and I had to hold that elevator full back. These airplanes, again, you know, if we tried to do this power off, it just wouldn't work. The Cessna 150 is a little bit more prone to spin in a power off configuration, but the 172s especially, and in large part, the 150s really need some power to be able to spin. So now we're going to jump in and do this spin to the right. Again, I'm not using any opposite aileron, but as you're going to see here, I probably needed to if I really wanted to get this thing continuing to spin to the right, because it didn't like it very much. Let's jump in the cockpit and take a look.
All right, everybody, now we're going to try a spin to the right. We'll see if we can get this to happen. Same thing as we did before. We're going to get to the brink of the stall. We're going to kick full right rudder, full back elevator, and see what happens. Here we go. We're pitching up. Full power, just like we're doing a power on stall. Maybe this happens because your student is, you know, he's heard you talking about full right rudder, or, you know, a lot of right rudder, and he just gets a little too excited with the right rudder, and it goes over to the right. We see the ball's going left here. Airspeed's dropping. Our nose is swinging to the right. All right, here we go. We got a stall indication coming on. Let's try it. All right, look at our ball. It's still off to the left. Our rate of turn, and we're going to recover. Power out. Aileron's neutral. The spin stopped on its own there. That's how reluctant these planes are to spinning.
There we go. Now you can see me. It really wanted to stop on its own without me doing anything, so we came out of it just a little bit early that time. All right, guys, back to you in the studio, Sam.
All right, so you saw the spin to the right there. The airplane really didn't want to do that, and it kind of forced its way out of the spin a little early. We managed to get the 3 rotations, but by the time we were coming out, it was basically unstalled and picking up that airspeed. Had I used a little bit of left aileron in the middle of the spin, it could have helped it continue to spin a little longer, but that just goes to show you how reluctant these planes are to spin. All right, everybody, well, that will about do it for today. I really appreciate you spending time with me. I had a ton of fun making this video, and I hope you got a lot out of it. I hope it served to help dispel some misunderstandings, misconceptions, or assumptions that have been made about the training I give. If you have any questions about spin training or spins in general, please leave them down in the comments. Please share this video with anyone else you think would find it helpful, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I really appreciate all your support, and until next time, resume your own navigation. See ya.